Montenegro is a rugged refuge where soaring peaks, hidden gorges and timeless towns reveal the wild heart of the Balkans. 4 weeks, 2,000 kilometers and many battles against snow, mud and rocks. This is our road trip through Montenegro. Road trip from Montenegro started in the northeast of the country, where, much to our surprise, we were welcomed by winter. Of course, in the mountains, snowfall in early October is nothing uncommon. However, we were at an altitude of 900 meters, which meant that half the country was getting draped in a blanket of white. There is something truly magical about witnessing the first winter ballet of the season. But when we woke up the next morning, our initial travel plans were buried under 20 centimeters of wet snow. And what's more, the heavens showed no sign of ceasing their frosty onslaught. Just getting back to the main road proved to be quite the adventure. All day long we drove through the eastern part of the country. But wherever we pointed our wheels, the landscape was cloaked in a mantle of grey and white. Sooner than expected, the daytime somberness morphed into the twilight of the approaching dusk. The next day, our hopes of seeing anything other than snow started to rise. At first feebly, but steadily growing stronger, the sun scattered the clouds and ended the short reign of Old Man Frost. Whereas the snow melted rapidly at lower elevations, its grip on the mountains was stronger. Nonetheless, we set out on the Durmitor Ring, a panorama road leading through the eponymous national park. Initially, we made good progress, as the way had apparently been cleared. However, just before we reached the highest point, the remaining snow put a sudden stop to our exploration. 10 days later, the landscape looked entirely different. In the light of the evening sun, the mountains were painted with an orange brush. Our camp among the mighty peaks was the most scenic in all of Montenegro. What a beautiful morning to go for a hike in the mountains. It is a little bit chilly, the temperature is probably hovering around freezing, but the air is mostly clear, so beautiful views all around. Now,
The goal for today is to climb the highest peak of the country. It's just about 4 kilometers, 700 meters of altitude gain, not too bad. However, there might be some challenges, predominantly leftover snow or ice from the heavy snowfall about 10 days ago. So I have to be careful, but in the meantime, I'll just enjoy being alone, surrounded by this magnificent nature.
Bobotov Kuk is generally counted as the highest mountain in the country, although strictly speaking, it is not the highest peak. For that, one has to climb Kolata. However, because the latter mountain lies almost entirely within Albania, Bobotov Kuk remains the primary goal of ambitious hikers. Soaking up the morning solitude, I was deeply captivated by the playful contrast of light and shadow.
For the first time in my life, I feel somewhat like an elf, like Legolas in The Lord of the Rings, because the snow is frozen solid, which means I can simply walk on top of it without sinking in. And that, of course, makes my progress a lot easier.
My spell as an elf didn't last long though, as the steeper snowfields quickly turned me back into a struggling hobbit. So far, the entire ascent had been manageable, but an icy chute almost prevented me from reaching the top. Foolishly, I had forgotten to bring crampons. But to my immense luck, I met Stefan from Serbia, who was kind enough to lend me an ice axe. Moments later, we both reached the summit, where we were welcomed by a breathtaking scenery. Particularly intriguing were these swift-moving wisps of cloud that tumbled across the jagged ridgeline. Once I had climbed down again, we continued our road trip. Heading northwest, the route led through many dark tunnels. Our destination was a mountain dale from which a mildly challenging hike led to an unusual landmark. Trnovačko jezero is a heart-shaped glacial lake. The icy giants that once formed the basin have long disappeared, but two mountain massives tower above the silent waters. Especially noteworthy is the northern range, as it is reigned over by Maglic, Bosnia's highest summit. Whereas the mountaintops were still covered in snow, the seasons had changed backwards in the valley below. Here, the deciduous trees had finally burst into color.
This is the Black Lake, one of the most popular tourist attractions in Montenegro. During the day, hundreds of people will stroll along the lakeshore and take in the beautiful scenery, but now early in the morning at 7 a.m. there's just a couple of photographers waiting for the fog to clear so they can take pictures of the beautiful mountains behind. And that is exactly my goal today, because I want to climb at least one of the higher peaks towering above the lake.
Even though there was little to see, the fog created a magical atmosphere. This sentiment was further enhanced when rays of sunshine heralded the new day. After a leisurely ascent in the forest, the path gradually became more arduous.
It is not without reason that this is described as one of the most challenging hikes of Montenegro, because there were some serious climbing sections on the way up, especially now with all the snow and ice left. The only one who didn't have a problem with all this climbing was my canine companion, but luckily I did bring my ice axe because it was very much necessary. I've now reached the first peak, second one is just behind me, about 30 minutes on the ridgeline to get there. But yeah, for the moment I'll just soak in the sun and rest a bit.
From the top of Mali Međed, I could make out both the Black Lake and the smaller Barno jezero. A less welcome sight was the front of swift-moving clouds. To avoid being caught in a storm, I continued along the ridge.
Wildlife in the mountains tends to be rather shy, and so I'm really excited to have spotted at least 4 chamois surrounding me. There's one right over there, and then there's at least 3 on top of this mountain. And it is just wonderful to see these animals in their natural habitat.
Chamois are a species of goat antelope that is native to Europe and Western Asia. These perfectly adapted mountain dwellers prefer rugged terrain at elevations up to 3,500 meters. Seven subspecies have been identified so far, with the one in Montenegro called the Balkan chamois. Allegedly, these are slightly larger than their brethren in the Alps, but it is virtually impossible to tell them apart. Despite the vertical slopes, chamois move with apparent ease, navigating even the most precipitous cliffs. This allows them to evade most predators, including lynx, bears and eagles. Somewhat distressing, however, is the fact that they are regularly chased by feral dogs.
Luckily, this time around I also brought crampons, because there's a massive snowfield in front of me and I don't think I want to cross that without some help. Can you not stand this? Great stuff. Could fetch the camera, that would be great. No? Okay.
After thoroughly exploring the landscapes of Montenegro's north, it was time to head towards the coast. followed minor off-road trails. This slower pace of travel allowed us to spot some animals, such as a red fox on the prowl. These cunning predators mostly hunt small birds and rodents, which they locate with their excellent hearing. Following some hiking shenanigans and a glorious golden hour drive, we finally beheld the Bay of Kotor. This inlet is sometimes likened to a fjord, as its sheer mountainsides resemble the coastline of Norway. But unlike the glacier-shaped valleys of the north, this gulf was formerly a river system. Humans have settled in the bay for thousands of years, and various medieval towns still line its shores. Needless to say, the combination of ample sunshine, natural splendor and well-preserved cities has turned the area into a tourist favorite. To escape the crowds, we started our visit in the early morning. Our first destination was Herceg Novi, a town with a turbulent past. Founded by the King of Bosnia in 1382, it later became part of both the Ottoman Empire and the Republic of Venice. These changing influences have left behind a blend of cultures which, in a sense, is emblematic of all the Balkans. Later in the day, we also visited Kotor, the main town on the inlet. At this point, everyone else had woken up as well, and the alleys were very crowded. Seeking out some solitude, we headed over to Štitan. In addition to pretty beaches, this peninsula is known for its abandoned military structures. Intrepid travelers can explore 3 naval tunnels, which were built by the Yugoslav Navy. These camouflaged moorings provided shelter for ships and submarines. Construction of the bases started in the 1950s, and today several of them can be found along the Adriatic coast. Leaving the sea behind, we drove up a thrilling switchback road. The views along the way were absolutely phenomenal. Further up, we reached the Black Mountains of Lovćen National Park, which are the namesake of modern-day Montenegro. On top of the mountain range's second highest peak, the Njegoš mausoleum commemorates Petar II. This Prince Bishop of Montenegro is known as one of the most important poets of the Serbian-speaking world. His epic, The Mountain Wreath, is considered a masterpiece of Slavic literature. the south of his august mountain throne, the multi-armed Lake Skadar marks the border with Albania. Undoubtedly the most stunning view is from above a horseshoe bend. Eager to experience the landscape more intimately, we decided to go on a boat trip. Before we could start though, our captain needed to put the water back in the lake. Shortly thereafter, we were flying down the river. In Montenegro, both the lake and some surrounding areas are protected as a national park. The entire ecosystem is known as a hotspot of freshwater biodiversity. 270 species of birds and 34 species of fish have been counted so far. Additionally, the lake's surface is covered by various types of water plants. Back on firm ground, we visited the ancient city of Bodva. According to mythology, this town was founded more than 2,500 years ago, which makes it one of the oldest settlements along the Adriatic coast. Its history is highly multifaceted, as over time it has been Illyrian, Greek, Roman, Venetian, Ottoman, Austrian and Yugoslavian. During the day, the alleys of the old town are usually full of people. But early in the morning, everything was deserted. Carrying on with our road trip, we followed the coast southward. In summer, Montenegro's seaside is highly popular with vacationers. Even in autumn, the clear water and balmy temperatures attract sunseekers. In addition to its maritime treasures, the coast also entices with architectural delights. One of the most famous landmarks is the island village of Sveti Stefan. The majority of its buildings date back to the 15th century. In the past, this picturesque settlement was home to around 400 people. However, in the 1950s, the island was converted into a luxury resort, which, ironically, is currently closed. Eventually, we left the coast behind and traveled inland. It did not take long before we looked out over Lake Skadar again, this time from its southwestern shore. Our favorite part was a small road high above the water, as it provided us with an array of wonderful vistas. Following a cursory glance at Podgorica, the largest city and capital of Montenegro, we set out on the Korita Panorama Road. At first, this route is tarred and suitable for all types of cars. For us, the real fun started where the asphalt ended though. Travelers with high clearance vehicles and four-wheel drive can continue along a bumpy off-road trail. has few obstacles, but its remote location and narrow path make it an exhilarating challenge. Because our pace was rather slow, ranging somewhere from 5 to 20 kilometers an hour, we used the opportunity to soak in the scenery. Every time the sun broke through the clouds, the rocky karst plateau delighted us with its magnificence. Almost 1,900 meters, we crossed over a pass, from where the trail led steeply downhill. The valley on the opposite side was no less mesmerizing. If anything, it was even more impressive. Somewhat surprisingly, we soon came upon signs of civilization. To allow their sheep and cattle to feed on green pastures, shepherds move into alpine settlements during summer. These secluded mountain dwellings are called katuns. Often they have neither running water nor electricity. On the plus side, they are embedded in fantastic landscapes. In the past, a katun was centered around the principle of strong kinship and the practice of a closed farming economy. Today, many have opened to the idea of tourism, which generates additional revenue and allows visitors to get away from it all. Nevertheless, the ringing of livestock bells remains the iconic soundtrack of rural Montenegro. Flocks of sheep move through the landscape from sunup to sundown, keeping the grass short wherever they go. Of course, they are mainly bred for their meat, but some of them could give an 80s hairstyle model a run for their money. To protect the livestock from predators, most flocks are accompanied by herding dogs. Some of these are a lot friendlier than expected. Other than by car, this region can also be explored on foot, as hiking trails provide access to isolated mountainscapes.
Today I've set out on a hike that will hopefully bring me to several peaks that are higher than 2,000 meters of elevation. Now I'm saying hopefully because the trail is characterized as rather challenging, which means difficult route finding, some steeper climbs, and also it's rather exposed to the weather, which is especially important today because there are quite a lot of dark clouds around me and also had a little bit of drizzle already. But for the moment, everything's going great and I'm really looking forward to climb some mountains.
Even for Montenegrin standards, this area is little visited. All day long, I did not meet a single other hiker. The only things keeping me company were the grey rock and lingering clouds.
I've made it to summit number 1. Now, these obviously aren't the conditions I was hoping for, because I can't see anything. The wind is quite brutal. My fingers are really cold. So the only thing I'll do up here is put myself in this weird summit book, and then I'll head directly to the next peak.
In the next hour, the weather deteriorated further. The chilling whip of the wind swept across the ridge, and visibility dropped from poor to terrible. Despite that, I reached the second peak, although my visit was rather short-lived. Only once I climbed down towards the third summit did the wind somewhat subside. Thankfully, the weather was much more pleasant in Mrtvica Canyon. There are multiple good reasons to venture into this gorge. Massive rock faces rise hundreds of meters in the air, whereas emerald green pools offer welcome refreshment in summer. Moreover, deep down in the valley, the untamed river carves its way through anything in its path. While the water needed millennia for its artwork, Yugoslav soldiers were significantly faster. In 1973, they blasted a 200-meter-long tunnel into the rock to connect both ends of the gorge. The main highlight of the hike was the Gate of Wishes. This natural stone arch is nestled in a bewitching forest. A green carpet of moss covers most trees in the vicinity. There is no doubt whatsoever that this is the most enchanting place in all of Montenegro. It took some time to break away from the magic of this forest, but eventually we continued our journey.
Montenegro is making things rather difficult in terms of finding a somewhat sensible route around the country, because again and again we find ourselves at closed roads. This, for example, until a year ago, used to be a four-wheel drive track leading up the mountain, and as you can clearly see, there's not much left of that. Our goal was to drive up this route until reaching a mountain lake about 6 kilometers up the road, and the only way now to get there is by either taking a 160-kilometer detour or walking, and clearly I opted for the latter.
At points, it was hard to imagine that there ever had been a road, but the views were too distracting to ponder that matter. Imbued with the glow of the dying sun and accompanied by the tingling of cowbells, the scenery was straight out of a fairy tale. After retracing some of the way, we picked a different route through the country's interior. Our first stop was Ostrog Monastery, the most popular pilgrimage site in Montenegro. This Serbian Orthodox church was built against an almost vertical cliff. Most fascinating, however, are the well-preserved frescoes. These intricate artworks of religious symbolism were painted at the end of the 17th century. To create an accurate composition, the artists had to carefully follow the features of the rock. Driving north, the roads were often narrow. Obviously, this did not take away from their scenery. On a clear day, the backcountry of Montenegro is staggering. And in recent years, it has become more accessible. Previously, only rough 4x4 trails led into the remote highlands, whereas now paved roads connect formerly hard-to-reach places. This newly gained accessibility does have its limits. Isolated mountain plateaus such as the Senjajevina remain the exclusive haunt of off-roaders. That is to say, if you're not a local. Montenegrins will drive just about any car up the toughest trails. Tourists, however, are well advised to only venture here in a 4x4. The reason for that is not just the rock-strewn path, but predominantly the sections of loose soil. Heavy rain, parts of the track turn into a quagmire of slippery mud. In our case, the remains of snowfields pose an additional challenge. On top of that, visibility was extremely poor. To this day, the rolling grasslands and rocky slopes are one of the largest traditional grazing areas in Europe. Humans and animals living here must be extremely tough, as the windswept plateau is known for its unforgiving weather. Scattered cartoons are proof of the hardy herdsmen still tending to their livestock. At the same time, there are signs of decay. Exploring this region is an unhurried pleasure, as progress is generally slow. the fog became so impenetrable that we could barely see ahead. Instead of pushing on, we settled down for the night and embraced the mysterious silence. The next morning, the trail got significantly easier. Leaving the clouds behind, we slowly descended from the highlands. Despite the grey sky doing its best to subdue the vibrance of autumn, the brilliance of the leaves could not be dimmed. Contrary to that, the piles of trash at every road bay around Montenegro seriously dampened our mood. A country with such magnificent natural beauty should be treated with more respect, especially by its citizens. Having made our way through the center of the country, we now set our eyes on the south. Here, mountain ranges attract visitors with a penchant for lofty pursuits. One of these is the Chamois. This massif boasts multiple peaks rising above 2,400 meters. At first glance, the rugged limestone towers almost seem indomitable. However, all of them are accessible on steep hikes, which makes the summit views all the more rewarding. We left this marvelous place behind. As we had run low on water, we were glad to come upon a fountain. Equipped with our trusty watering can, we patiently filled our tank. Days, we enjoyed the fabulous weather on scenic off-road trails, had lunch next to tranquil lakes, and listened to the rustling of the leaves. We also saw the snow-capped peaks of Kosovo, and in fact drove all the way to the border. Fortunately, we did not intend to cross over, as this particular border post has been closed for vehicles since 1999. However, it is possible to access Kosovo on foot, as the area is part of the Peaks of the Balkans trail. This 160-kilometer-long cross-border hiking route connects the mountains of Albania, Montenegro and Kosovo, and usually requires around 10 days of walking. One of the highlights along the way is Hricko jezero. Aside from its pristine splendor, numerous myths surround the serene lake. Local legends describe how the water is inhabited by lake fairies, mythical creatures from a realm of reverie and bewitchment. Moreover, the water is said to have healing properties, granting youth, beauty and health. A stark contrast to that is the name of the surrounding landscape. The local name Prokletie literally translates to accursed mountains. The origin of the term is disputed, but according to folklore, the devil escaped from hell and, in a single day of mischief, he created this rugged and inhospitable karst range. On a gloomy day, this story seems quite plausible. But as soon as the sun is out, the scenery is exceptionally pretty. In addition to soaring peaks, there are also other sights to discover. The Adi Pasha Springs, for example, are part of a spring horizon. This term describes a water-retaining layer from which several springs emerge horizontally. By far the most beautiful of these is the Eye of the Grasshopper. This dazzling karst spring is around 25 meters wide and up to 70 meters deep. The outflowing water is so clear that it is difficult to visually gauge its depth. In autumn, the turquoise pool and the yellow, red and orange hues of the leaves create a phenomenal contrast. Another aquatic spectacle waited along the trek to the Ropojana Valley. From here, a hiking trail leads over to Albania, but that is a story for another time. Luckily, the views on the Montenegrin side are at least equally as superb. Our last destination was the Grebaje Valley. This flat dale is ideal for a leisurely stroll. At the same time, the precipitous cliffs beckoned me to embark on one final adventure.
I've successfully made it to the summit. As usual, I'm not entirely alone. There's one dog here, another one there. It was 6 when I set out in the valley. 2 made it all the way up to the summit. I don't really like the look of these clouds over there, so I'm just going to put my name in the summit book and then safely head back down again.
Surrounded by snow-capped peaks and perched high above quaint valleys, this was the perfect end to an extraordinary journey. After 4 weeks, having driven more than 2,000 kilometers, it was time to say farewell. Our road trip through Montenegro was not without challenges. Blocked roads, heavy snowfall and a questionable driving culture often tested our endurance. But we also experienced the very best of autumn. From the sun-kissed coast to multicolored mountain slopes, this small country spoiled us with its natural grandeur. When we set out on this journey, we were looking for adventure. At the end, we could confidently say that we found it.